Hi, readers. Happy Friday. We made it through another week of NTI. Here we are for Read Aloud. Hope you like it today. Let's try to finish chapter 6, okay? Let me get my timer. Make the screen big for you. Here we go. Just to make sure I understand, I said, if today is September 3rd, 1940, and then tomorrow is also September 3rd, well, for a few of the loop's 24 hours, it's September 2nd. But yes, it's the 3rd. So tomorrow never comes? In a manner of speaking. Outside, a distant clap of what sounded like thunder echoed, and the darkening window rattled in its frame. Miss Peregrine looked up and again drew out her watch. I'm afraid that's all the time I have at the moment. I do hope you'll stay for supper. I said that I would, that my father might be wondering where I was. Hardly crossed my mind. I squeezed out from behind the desk and began following her to the door. But then another question occurred to me, one that had been nagging at me for a long time. Was my grandfather really running from the Nazis when he came here? He was, she said. A number of children came to us during those awful years leading up to the war. There was so much upheaval. She looked pained, as if the memory was still fresh. I found Abraham at a camp for displaced persons on the mainland. He was a poor, tortured boy, but so strong. I knew at once that he belonged with us. I felt relieved. At least that part of his life was, as I had understood it to be. There was one more thing I wanted to ask, though, and I didn't quite know how to put it. Was he, my grandfather, was he like us? I nodded. She smiled strangely. He was like you, Jacob. And she turned and hobbled towards the stairs. What does that mean? Like you. Miss Peregrine insisted that I wash off the bog mud before sitting down to dinner and asked Emma to run me a bath. I think she hoped that by talking to me a little, Emma would start to feel better, but she wouldn't even look at me. I watched as she ran cold water into the tub and then warmed it with her bare hands, swirling them around until steam rose. That is awesome, I said, but she left without saying a word in response. Once I turned the water thoroughly brown, I toweled off and found a change of clothes hanging from the back of the door, baggy tweed pants, a button-up shirt, and a pair of suspenders that were far too short, but that I couldn't figure out how to adjust. I was left with the choice of wearing pants either around my ankles or hitched up to my belly button. I decided the latter was the lesser of evils, so I went downstairs to have what would be likely the strangest meal of my life, while dressed like a clown without makeup. Dinner was a dizzying blur of names and faces, many of them half remembered from photographs and my grandfather's long-ago descriptions. When I came into the dining room, the kids, who'd been clamoring noisily for seats around the long table, froze and stared at me. I got the feeling they didn't get a lot of dinner guests. Miss Peregrine, already seated at the head of the table, stood up and used the sudden quiet as an opportunity to introduce me. For those of you who haven't already had the pleasure of meeting him, she announced, this is Abraham's grandson, Jacob. He is our honored guest and has come a very long way to be here. I hope you will treat him accordingly. Then she pointed to each person in the room and recited their names, most of which I immediately forgot, as happens when I'm nervous. The introductions were followed by a barrage of questions, which Miss Peregrine batted away with rapid-fire efficiency. Is Jacob going to stay with us? Not to my knowledge. Where is Abe? Abe is busy in America. Why does Jacob got Victor's trousers on? Victor doesn't need them anymore, and Mr. Portman's are being washed. What's Abe doing in America? At this question, I saw Emma, who had been glowering in a corner, rise from her chair and stalk out of the room. The others, apparently used to her volatile moods, paid no attention. Never mind what Abe's doing, Miss Peregrine snapped. When he's coming back. Never mind that too. Now let's eat. Everyone stampeded to their seats, thinking I'd found an empty chair. I went to sit and felt a fork jab my thigh. Excuse me, cried Millard, but Miss Peregrine made him give it up anyway, sending him to put on clothes. How many times must I tell you, she called after him, polite persons do not take their supper in the nude. Kids with kitchen duty appeared bearing trays of food, all covered with gleaming silver tops so that you couldn't see what was inside, sparking wild speculation about what might be for dinner. Otter's Wellington, one boy cried. Salted kitten and shrew's liver, another said, to which the younger children responded with gagging sounds. But when the covers were finally lifted, a feast of kingly proportions was revealed. A roasted goose, its flesh a perfect brown color, golden brown, a whole salmon and a whole cod, each outfitted with lemons and fresh dill and pats of melted butter, a bowl of steamed mussels, platters of roasted vegetables, loaves of bread still cooling from the oven, and all manner of jellies and sauces I didn't recognize, but that looked delicious. It all glowed invitingly in the flicker of gaslight lamps, a world away from the oily stews and undetermined origin I'd been choking down at the priest hole. I hadn't eaten since breakfast and proceeded to stuff myself silly. It shouldn't have surprised me that the peculiar children have peculiar eating habits, but between forkfuls of food, I found myself sneaking glances around the room. Olive, the levitating girl, had to be belted to a chair screwed to the floor so that she wouldn't float up to the ceiling. That's funny. So the rest of us wouldn't be plagued by insects. Hugh, the boy who had bees living in his stomach, ate under a large mosquito net at a table for one in the corner. Claire, a doll-like girl with immaculate golden curls, sat next to Miss Peregrine but ate not a morsel. Aren't you hungry? I asked her. Claire don't eat with the rest of us, Hugh volunteered, a bee escaping from his mouth. She's embarrassed. I am not, she said, glaring at him. Yeah, then eat something. No one here is embarrassed by their gift, Miss Peregrine said. Miss Densmore simply prefers to dine alone. Isn't that right, Miss Densmore? The girl stared at the empty place before her, clearly wishing that all attention would vanish. Claire has a back mouth, explained Millard, who sat beside me now in a smoking jacket and nothing else. A what? Go on, show him, someone said. Soon everyone at the table was pressuring Claire to eat something. And finally, just to shut them up, she did. A leg of goose was set before her. She turned around in her chair, and gripping its arms, she bent over backwards, dipping the back of her head to the plate. I heard a distinct smacking sound, and when she lifted her head again, a giant bite had disappeared from the goose leg. Beneath her golden hair was a shed of sharp-toothed jaws. Suddenly, I understood the strange picture of Claire that I'd seen in Miss Peregrine's album, to which the photographer had devoted 2 panels, one for her daintily pretty face, and another for the curls that so thoroughly masked the back of her head. See how she has like 2 sides to her picture, because one is her face and the other is the back of her head, but really beneath the curl she has like a giant mouth, and that's what she ate out of. Isn't that funny? Claire turned forward and crossed her arms, annoyed that she'd let herself be talked into such a humiliating demonstration. She sat in silence while the others peppered me with questions. After Miss Peregrine had dismissed a few more about my grandfather, the children turned to other subjects. They seemed especially interested in what life in the 21st century was like. What kind of flying motor cars do you have? Asked a pubescent boy named Horace, who wore a dark suit that made him look like an apprentice undertaker. None, I said. Not yet, anyway. Have they built cities on the moon? Another boy asked hopefully. We left some garbage and a flag there in the 60s, but that's about it. Does Britain still rule the world? Not exactly. We know that from social studies. They seemed disappointed. Sensing an opportunity, Miss Peregrine said, You see, children, the future isn't so grand after all. Nothing wrong with the good old here and now. I got the feeling this was something she often tried to impress upon them, with little success. But it got me wondering, just how long had they been here in the good old here and now? Do you mind if I ask how old you all are? I said. I'm 83, said Horace. Olive raised her hand excitedly. I'll be 75 and a half next week. I wondered how they kept track of months and years if the days never changed. I'm either 117 or 118, said a heavy-lidded boy named Enoch. He looked no more than 13. I lived in another loop before this one, he explained. I'm nearly 87, said Millard, with his mouth full of goose drippings. And as he spoke, a half-chewed mass quavered in his invisible jaw for all to see. Ugh. There were groans as people covered their eyes and looked away. Then it was my turn. I was 16, I told them. I saw a few kids' eyes widen. Olive laughed in surprise. It was strange to them that I should be so young, but what was strange to me was how young they seemed. I knew plenty of 80-year-olds in Florida, and these kids acted nothing like them. It was as if the constants of their lives here, the unvarying days, this perpetual deathless summer, had arrested their emotions as well as their bodies, sealing them in their youth like Peter Pan and his lost boys. A sudden boom sounded from the outside. The second one this evening, but louder and closer than the first, rattling silverware and plates. "Hurry up and finish, everyone!" Miss Peregrine sang out, and no sooner had she said it than another concussion jolted the house, throwing a framed picture off the wall behind me. "What is that?" "It's those Jerrys again," growled Olive, thumping her little fist on the table, clearly in imitation of some ill-tempered adult. Then I heard what sounded like a buzzer going off somewhere far away, and suddenly it occurred to me what was happening. This was the night of September 3rd, 1940, and in a little while, a bomb was going to fall from the sky and blow a giant hole in the house. The buzzer was an air raid siren, sounding from the ridge. "We have to get out of here," I said, panic rising in my throat. "We have to go before the bomb hits." "He doesn't know," giggled Olive. "He thinks we're going to die." "It's only the changeover," said Millard with a shrug of his smoking jacket. "No reason to get your knickers in a twist." "This happens every night?" Miss Peregrine nodded. "Every single evening," she said. Somehow, though, I was not reassured. "May we go outside and show Jacob?" said Hugh. "Yes, may we?" Claire begged, suddenly enthused after 20 minutes of sulking. "The changeover is ever so beautiful." Miss Peregrine demurred, pointing out that they hadn't yet finished their dinners, but the children pleaded with her until she relented. "All right, so long as you all wear your masks," she said. The children burst out of their seats and ran from the room, leaving poor Olive behind until someone took pity and came to unbelt her from her chair. I ran after them through the house into the wood-paneled foyer, where they each grabbed something from the cabinet before bounding out the door. Miss Peregrine gave me one too, and I stood turning it over in my hands. It looked like a sagging face of black rubber, with wide glass portholes like eyes that were frozen in shock, and a droopy snout that ended in a perforated canister. "Go ahead," Miss Peregrine said. "Put it on." Then I realized what it was, a gas mask. I strapped it over my face and followed her out onto the lawn, where the children stood scattered like chess pieces on an unmarked board, anonymous behind their upturned masks, watching billows of black smoke roll across the sky. Treetops burned in the hazy distance. The drone of unseen airplanes seemed to come from everywhere. Now and then came a muffled blast I could feel in my chest like a thump of a second heart, followed by waves of broiling heat, like someone opening and closing an oven right in front of me. I ducked at each concussion, but the kids never so much as flinched. Instead, they sang, their lyrics timed perfectly to the rhythm of the bombs. "Run, rabbit, run, run, run. Bang, bang, bang goes the farmer's gun. He'll get by without his rabbit pie, so run, rabbit, run." So they're all outside like watching these bombs drop, and Jacob, of course, is kind of freaking out, but the kids are like singing a little song. Bright tracer bullets scored the heavens just as the song ended. The kids applauded like onlookers at a firework display. Violent slashes of color reflected in their masks. This nightly assault had become such a regular part of their lives that they'd ceased to think of it as something terrifying. In fact, the photograph I'd seen of it in Miss Peregrine's album had been labeled "Our Beautiful Display," and in its own morbid way, I suppose it was. So she has a picture of the like bombs going off and in the sky and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy. It began to drizzle as if all that flying metal had riven holes in the clouds. The concussions came less frequently. The attack seemed to be ending. The children started to leave. I thought we were going back inside, but they passed the front door and headed for another part of the yard. "Where are we going?" I asked two masked kids. They said nothing, but seemed to sense my anxiety. They took me gently by the hands and led me along with the others. We rounded the house to the back corner, where everything was gathering around a giant where everyone was gathering around a giant topiary. This one wasn't a mythical creature, though, but a man repositioned in the grass, one arm supporting him, the other pointing to the sky. It took a moment before I realized that it was a leafy replica of Michelangelo's fresco of Adam in the Sistine Chapel. Considering that it was made from bushes, it was really impressive. You could almost make out the placid expression on Adam's face, which had two blooming gardenias for eyes. I saw the wild-haired girl standing nearby. She wore a flower print dress that had been patched so many times it almost looked like a quilt. I went over to her, pointing to Adam, and said, "Did you make this?" The girl nodded. "How?" She bent down and held one of her palms above the grass. A few seconds later, a hand-shaped section of blades wriggled and stretched and grew until they were brushing the bottom of her palm. "That," I said, "is crazy." Clearly, I was not at my most articulate. Someone shushed me. The children were all standing silently with their necks craned, pointing at a section of the sky. I looked up but could only see clouds of smoke, the flickering orange of fires reflected against them. Then I heard a single airplane cut through the rest. It was close and getting closer. Panic flooded me. This is the night they were killed. Not just the night, but the moment. Could it be, I wondered, that these children died every evening only to be resurrected by the loop, like some Cephean suicide cult, condemned to be blown up and stitched back together for eternity? Something small and gray parted the clouds and came hurtling towards us. A rock, I thought, but rocks don't whistle as they fall. Run, rabbit, run. I would have, but now there was no time. All I could do was scream and dive to the ground for cover. But there was no cover, so I hit the grass and threw my arms over my head as if somehow that would keep it attached to my body. I clenched my jaw and shut my eyes and held my breath, but instead of the deafening blast I was bracing for, everything went completely, profoundly quiet. This small gray thing that's coming through the clouds is a bomb. So he's ducking, realizing it's too late to run. Let's see what happens next. I clenched my jaw and shut my eyes and held my breath, but instead of the deafening blast I was bracing for, everything went completely, profoundly quiet. Suddenly, there were no growling engines, no whistling bombs, no pops of distant guns. It was as if someone had muted the world. Was I dead? I uncovered my head and slowly looked behind me. The wind-bent boughs of trees were frozen in place. The sky was a photograph of arrested flames licking a cloud bank. Drops of rain hung suspended before my eyes, and in the middle of the circle of children, like the object of some arcane ritual, there hovered a bomb, its downward-facing tip seemingly balanced on Adam's outstretched finger. Then, like a movie that burns in the projector while you're watching it, a bloom of hot and perfect whiteness spread out before me and swallowed everything. So he is at the exact moment where the loop is happening. There's a bomb coming down. He's ducking to hide. Everything goes quiet and he looks up and there's this bomb just like hovering in the sky right in front of them. And then everything goes white. So remember that Miss Peregrine was talking about how she can control time? So it seems like at this moment when the bomb is literally, 6 feet off the ground about to blow up the house and them, she stopped time. So I'm wondering, is she going to rewind it? What's going to happen next? We're at a good break, so we're going to stop here. Chapter 6 is a couple pages long still. So tomorrow, or I think this is a Friday day, and so probably on Monday, we will finish chapter 6, and depending on the time, we might be able to start chapter 7. Okay, I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thanks for listening to me. It was a good read today, huh? Yeah, bye-bye.